Yesterday you heard Amanda, and I was so glad I didn't have to follow Amanda, because I don't know how you do that. You also heard Tim. I don't particularly want to follow Tim either. By the way, has anybody invited Tim to join Rotary? Okay. Last night you heard Steve Snyder and his really encouraging talk about diversity and things that president-elects do to address diversity. And that's the topic of my talk. John, do you want me to smile?
Thank you, Sylvia.
Okay. I'm going to be talking with you about some of my experiences in Rotary and outside of Rotary, some of the experiences that made me think about diversity and Rotary membership, how embracing one helps the other. Most of you can remember that when you ask a new Rotarian, why didn't you join Rotary before? What do they usually say? Nobody asked me. There are some reasons why we don't ask, and I want to talk a little about that. So, we'll look at some of those reasons. I'm an educator and a psychotherapist, and I think that I know how to judge people. I think I do, but I really don't when I'm looking for prospective Rotary members. So I will share with you some of the personal experiences that I've had in my life and in my Rotary journey, and some of the life lessons I've learned. Perhaps some of you have had experiences like that, maybe not. What you do with the experiences is what matters, what you think about them. Incoming President Gary Huang says, "Light up Rotary." RI President Ron Burton asked us to engage Rotary and change lives. The lives you change will include your own.
We want to be able to
You want me to stand up? So let me tell you a little of how Rotary changed my life in the process of service above self, the learning and the opportunities for growth, the arena in which I could get a glimpse of some of the concerns that we as Rotarians try to address. I will talk about women first, since that was a situation dear and near to me. In a section yesterday, someone mentioned that Rotary was always described as male, pale, and stale. Well, we'll talk about some of that. The story about women was how I came to Rotary. It's still relevant because in the Rotary world, as Steve mentioned yesterday, only 18% of the members are women. In the United States, only 38% of the members are women. Look at the opportunities out there to increase membership and promote diversity at the same time and take away the male. I've had 27 years to learn about this institution called Rotary International, to really feel myself a functional part of this great humanitarian organization, probably the greatest, certainly the largest of the ones I know. There are many service organizations, but I had the good fortune to be invited to join Rotary, the all-male Rotary Club of Duarte. The superintendent, who was president, took a chance to invite women because he was invested in the possibilities that could come with a larger club. Remember, it wasn't a woman's issue. The women were just available, and he was looking for members. When I was invited to join the Rotary Club of Duarte, which was at the time engaged in a court struggle over the admission of women, I learned about the place to which many women were relegated. In the minds of men and women, we had women who objected just as much as some men did. There were many women who opposed the admission of women. And believe it or not, I met a few of them in India a couple of months ago. A really stalwart group of Rotarians who didn't want to give up their identity as the women who supported the men in Rotary. A club had invited them to join, but they were somewhat reluctant. The cultural divide was a concern. I had a short talk with three of them, and I shared my experiences in Rotary and the journeys we had taken to get there. They joined that night and are now an active part of the Rotary Club of Calcutta Metropolitan. But back to Duarte. As we made our 11-year journey through California courts, we received a few gender-based, unpleasant telephone calls. And I found myself wondering about the deep-seated beliefs that were leading many to reject the idea that women could be capable Rotarians. as volunteers serving from the heart. Had we looked around, we would have seen, as former past RI President Marjorie Agbe described it, women working alongside men in almost every area of employment, as physicians, as professors, as engineers, as construction workers, as business executives. When the first Rotary bylaws were written, they specified that Rotarians be persons of integrity. Somehow, at a time when there were more men than women in the management positions of the workaday world, that morphed into men of integrity. It wasn't tested until women were invited to join Rotary, and then the uproar resulted in the removal of the charter of the Rotary Club. What then was the genesis of that belief, outside of the bylaws, that women were not worthy of or capable of being Rotarians and working to provide the same humanitarian assistance that men were doing? It may not even have been a relegation of women to a place of lesser importance than men, but it may have been a belief that women couldn't shoulder the work that needed to be done, or I would like to believe that some men were so invested in the value of their commitment to Rotary that they didn't want to share it with women. Either way, the result is that a part of our society excluded, without good reason, another part deemed incapable of sharing their exploits. We have learned from the presence of women in Rotary that they are capable of much more than behind-the-scenes meal preparation, as one caller suggested. Interestingly enough, most of the great chefs are male. But is it, as Claire Booth Luce said, because I'm a woman, I must make unusual efforts to succeed? If I fail, no one will say, she didn't have what it takes. They will say, women don't have what it takes. There are still clubs today that say they cannot find capable women, Rotary caliber women. Steve mentioned that last night. A few weeks ago in Victoria, British Columbia, a past president told me that 14 male members resigned when he invited women to join the club. He says they were replaced and their duties assumed by 4 women. You see, women do work alongside men, bringing their mystique to the board tables, the work trenches, the financial negotiations, and all of the parts that men and women have been so successful in doing for the past 27 years. Yes, there is a gender perspective, but it's not a conflict-producing perspective. Susan B. Anthony, remember her, said, "The day will come when man will recognize woman as his peer, not only at the fireside, but in the councils of the nations. Then, and not until then, will there be the perfect comradeship, the ideal union between the sexes that shall result in the highest development of the race." One of the responses we had to women in Rotary, and you'll find this interesting, was a question about whether we would open it up to other races. I assured the caller that we had with my induction. So what are some of the other situations that tend to limit our access to capable Rotarians, as it once limited our access to capable women? My grandmother used to repeat a quote, "Never judge someone by the way he looks, or a book by the way it is covered, for inside the tattered pages, there's a lot to be discovered." She taught me, never judge a book by its cover. But I only really understood that phrase when I had a significant thought-altering experience many years ago. I was raised in a third world culture where class distinctions were the rule of the day and the main earmarks of prejudice. Because I was a light-skinned black person, I thought myself immune to the pronunciations of worthlessness that were heaped on darker-skinned persons. As a young person, my response to differences was largely only skin-deep. One of the insidious consequences of prejudice is that you can be taught to undervalue and fear, even disdain those of whom you are really a part. As a musical commentary on life in the 40s, Rodgers and Hammerstein wrote South Pacific. Here a part of Charles Wagner's rendition of "You've Got to Be Carefully Taught." If you know the story, it is the scene in which the young Lieutenant Cable is being courted by Bloody Mary as a husband for her Polynesian daughter. He is told by a colleague that his reluctance comes from something with which he was born. He disagrees in the words of the following song.
You've got to be taught to hate and fear. You've got to be taught from year to year. It's got to be drummed in your dear little ear. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be taught to be afraid of people whose eyes are oddly made, and people whose skin is a different shade. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be taught before it's too late, before you are 6 or 7 or 8, to hate all the people your relatives hate. You've got to be carefully taught.
So I was no doubt carefully taught, maybe not by words, but certainly by examples, attitudes, innuendos, and dark humor. But my soul-searching moment came when I ran out of gasoline on a busy New York City expressway and my car sputtered to a halt. I walked ahead to the Highway Patrol phone to report my problem, and I was told by the person on the other end of the line, "If you're still there in an hour, call us back." So as I stood there befuddled and probably looking very pathetic, a car going in the other direction on the other side of the freeway pulled up, and the driver, a black man with his head tied by a ragged handkerchief, called out, "What's the matter, baby?" I can't adequately describe for you the hesitation with which I explained my problem, because I was looking right at the cover of this man, and it was everything I had been taught to avoid. He said, "I'll get you some gas, baby." And in the 10 minutes or so before he returned, a million unpleasant scenarios played in my head. He returned, poured gasoline from a can into the gas tank, poured some in the carburetor, and started my car. I offered him the $3 I had. He said, "Only cost 29 cents. Remember, this was probably before many of you were born." And gasoline was only 25 cents a gallon. Anyhow, I went on my way. I was only about 10 minutes from home, went inside and took a deep breath to reconstruct what had just happened. What had just happened was that I had found inside some tattered pages a gem. I replayed the potentially dangerous situation, stranded on the freeway, and realized it was that concern for my safety that led me to trust in a seemingly undesirable quantity. I dug deeply to find the genesis of my beliefs, which had excluded this man from my circle of acceptables. It's a journey we should all take, hopefully without the push of a precarious situation. So today I look back at the naivety of my thinking then. Should I have been concerned about his appearance, his color, over which he had little control, or his behavior, over which he had the ultimate control? Could he have made a good Rotarian had our meeting circumstances been different? Our perceptions, if we're not sensitive to the fact that they are not reality, can lead us to undervalue some people. What about people we perceive as not being smart enough for our group, or perhaps not working in the right kind of job? Probably they have the right classification because there are many. A few weeks ago, I had occasion to change planes in Portland Airport. I was getting off a toy plane, the express planes they call them, and transferring to a full-size airplane, so the walk between the terminals was long. I was tired and lazy and had a bag whose wheels were as challenged as my knees, so I requested a wheelchair. As we taxied to the gate, I could see the wheelchair being managed by someone who appeared learning challenged. Now, I'm an educator, and I have worked with students who were educable and students who were trainable, and my own personal ethics, even without the 4-way test, prescribed my behavior. But in my head, I was thinking, I hope he can find the way to the other terminal. It didn't take 5 seconds for my better brain to kick in and say, "What are you thinking? What is your problem?" I watched the young man navigate through a number of back hallways, up and down elevators, over some pretty rough terrain that he could have or should have avoided, and over the journey my appreciation of the fact that he was holding a job and doing it well continued to grow. At my destination, I gave him twice the tip I would ordinarily have given, part of it genuinely for him, but the other part to assuage my guilt at questioning his appearance and doubting his ability because of it. Could he have made a good Rotarian had our meeting circumstances been different? Think about it for a while. So I continued to negotiate the journey through Rotary. So where has this journey taken me? To Kentucky, for one, where I had the courage to talk about diversity, to a warm and welcoming audience, which included President Burton. In fact, he recognized the need for that dialogue when he invited me to talk about diversity to the International Assembly of Governors. I've not traveled much in the southern United States, and much of what I have has been for Rotary. I've made up in London in the Clapham Club, where a female was as much diversity as they could handle. One of my more significant events was traveling to India to be part of the NIDS team. I grew up in a country that was part of the British Commonwealth, as was India. But the India of my history books was the India of Elephant Walk and Maharajas and magnificent palaces. I was not prepared for the squalor and poverty I saw in many of the parts of India where we traveled to give polio inoculations. But I was also not prepared for the contrast in lifestyles present in that huge populace. I was also not prepared for the size of the hearts in Indian Rotarians, their dogged pursuit of solutions to health and education needs. Look at their record in polio. Their graciousness and hospitality, their sense of responsibility towards change in economic and social situations in their country, and their growing sense of the need for diversity. My governor's project last year, was to raise money for a school in India, a school devoted to the education of girls. All first-generation learners, started by an Indian woman who came to America when she was a teenager. Many of you know Deepa. She's addressing another aspect of exclusion and providing for the diversity of learners. Nicholas Kristof, in his award-winning book, Half the Sky, addresses the victimization of women around the world, including our own United States. One effort towards erasing that victimization is the education of girls, who will pass on that goal to their children and their children's children. So I've engaged Rotary in many ways. It has encouraged me to focus on the fact that we, both you and I, need to take time to look deep inside us to find where our biases originate, whether they make sense, whether they're resulting in unethical behavior, and how we extinguish them. We are, each of us, born with only two sets of unchangeable attributes. I'll let you guess what they might be. One is still up for question. One is our race and the other is our gender, which is which. When Sebastian Cruz, remember the 10-year-old who sang the national anthem a few months ago and in one of the NBA's final games? When he sang, racists twittered, they were on Twitter forever, about the appearance of a Mexican singing the national anthem. Sebastian was born in San Antonio, Texas. American born and bred. He was a good singer, a good-looking kid with no apparent objectionable characteristics. What was the valid reason for the objections? Should you even object to someone who wants to sing the national anthem? Why do we object when someone is doing a good thing? Strange the things that push our buttons. When my daughter was 16 and attending youth group in the First Baptist Church, she came home and told me she wanted to be baptized. Well, I had done my duty as a Christian mother and had her baptized as an infant. Well, actually really christened, sprinkle a little water on. Well, it really wasn't a baptism, it was a christening. But this was going to be the real thing, baptism by immersion. So not somewhat, but really miffed at the fact that my baptism wasn't good enough for her, I went to my minister seeking his support. His response to me was, wanting to be baptized can't be the worst thing she ever wanted to do. Well, so I shut up and I put up and I happily went to her baptism. So here's a young man, Sebastian, singing the national anthem, doing something positive, and people are asking why. So here was the good and the bad. Are we searching for integrity inside our own souls too? The important thing to remember is, as in the words of the song, You've got to accentuate the positive, eliminate the negative, latch on to the affirmative. I also try to do my bit through Rotary to present the picture of blacks in America. And you know they're perceived differently than blacks from the Caribbean or blacks from Africa. Think about it. And I host exchange students whenever I can. Invariably, they leave my home calling me mom. I have a lot of kids who call me mom all over the place. And with a better picture than that with which they entered. I've had students from Germany, Japan, Turkey, and Mexico. I'm chosen by people I know, but I'm always a surprise to the students. After all, their vision of Americans is largely what they see in the media. And for the most part, blacks are not positively presented in the media. But like many other black families, I run a conservative home. I love my family, and we can care for other people's children. We always eventually get to talking about race relations and perceptions, and I get a chance to demonstrate that everything you see on the cover of a book is not an illustration of its contents. All of this can be done by engaging Rotary. So what about other races and ethnic groups? Hispanics are another vastly misunderstood group, coming as they are from cultures as different as black and white. But their language seems to place them in one group, identified as Hispanic, although they represent more cultures than you can imagine. Costa Rica, from Mexico, from Spain, from the Dominican Republic, from Puerto Rico, South America's many countries, and so on, ad infinitum, all different from each other. You can raise your children to be colorblind. If we can be taught to hate and fear, we can also be taught to love and appreciate. But it takes some self-awareness that overcomes some inbred biases. When I have a celebration at home and I invite my friends, black is not the predominant color of the gathering because my friends come from many places, and I often find myself examining the guest list and wondering, what's going on here? During one of those celebrations, my daughter was giving a tour through photographs of 6 years of ballet classes and recitals. You know, you have them all lined up. In each group of students, she was the only black ballerina. Her challenge to the guest was, "Can you find me?" You see, her color was not her identification of herself, and I like to believe not of anyone else. I have come to learn that the persons who people my world are still the persons who are realizing the advantages and experiences with which I grew up. I carry personal guilt because I criticize some of these realities in other people, some of the same ones I see in myself. Sometimes we have to be proactive in reaching out to those who are seldom chosen. Younger generations, and they're a group we're learning to appreciate, are more accepting because we have taught them, even if we don't practice it ourselves, that there is only a common humanity whose generosity is not segmented by race, creed, color, gender, age, or sexual preference. We're often put off by the way someone looks, a reaction taught to us by personal, cultural, and social situations. What about the ethnic diversity? Margaret Mead said, "If we are to achieve a rich culture, rich in contrasting values, we must recognize the whole gamut of human potentialities, and so weave a less arbitrary social fabric, one in which each diverse gift will be in a fitting place." Gwendolyn Tucker, who was my advisor at the University of Michigan, says, "We don't need a melting pot. That's not what we want. We need a rich mosaic where every distinct piece retains its own integrity but contributes to the whole." If we believe in the capability of each piece to contribute something of value, then how rich can we make a club that embraces diversity? In many countries, we have a de facto segregation of races, yet in many we do not. And Rotary meetings seem to be peopled by persons more alike than diverse. Rotary International says that a club that reflects its community with regards to business and professional classifications, gender, age, religion, and ethnicity is a club with the key to its future. As we grow a new generation, used to sharing their space with people of different colors, different genders, and different sexual persuasions, we can expect to see not just a tolerance, but a spirit of inclusion towards people of different persuasions whose common goal is service above self. We're working for peace. Isabel Allende said, "Peace requires everyone to be in the circle, each one to contribute to its wholeness." Inclusion. Manas Afkami, a lifelong advocate of human rights, said, "We have the ability to achieve, if we master the necessary goodwill, a common global society, blessed with a shared culture of peace that is nourished by the ethnic, national, and local diversities that enrich our lives. Our community is no longer just the residential area in which we live, or the town that supports it, or the state that governs it. We are citizens of the world where every issue, no matter how small or seemingly far removed from us, has an effect on us. Our community is the world. Our representatives should resemble the world community. If we are serious about peace and engaging Rotary to change lives, then we must look beyond those shadings of differences that used to dictate how we choose our friends, and choose those worthy and capable people who can help us to serve, because we are the world. We cannot replace hate and fear with apathy towards others with whom we smile and for whom we do not hesitate to serve, but will not walk alongside. We can help people to build up their self-pride by engaging them in serving others. We can help them help themselves by encouraging them to fish along with us. And perhaps a good place to start is in the communities we are trying to help. What if we went into those communities and recruited some of their members to help us in our hands-on projects? We have to think about Steve's caution about what it costs to join a Rotary. So let's ask young people, our new generations, who are conversant really in social media sites in a way that we can only admire. Ask them how they recruit helpers for their projects. We're giving community members an opportunity to participate in helping themselves, and perhaps, just perhaps, we may find people there if we are open. People who just might make good Rotarians, who like what we do and would like to work with us, if only we would invite them. Using social media sites, a biggie for communicating, is not the only skill we see in younger Rotarians. They're changing what, for years, we have taken for granted: where we meet, what we eat, how often we meet, what kind of projects we do, and so on, to our great benefit. So as I look around today, I see a significant shift in the ages of people we are selecting to be our civic leaders. There are more young people represented in those fields than there used to be, and in many other areas of leadership. That's a note I have made. I continuously search for those ways I can be a better person, and I invite you to come along with me, to go out and find someone different to invite, to look at your classification system and find people to fill in those vacant spots. We are humanity. Humanitarianism is what we strive to practice. Rotary is the best vehicle I know for making that happen. Engage it and give care, concern, respect, and acceptance. Light up Rotary with healthy respect for people whose only significant characteristic for us should be their ability to serve with integrity. Michael Jackson sang about the world: make a little space, make it a better place, heal the world. Peace is our goal. Let's start within our hearts. We are the world.